Hello, this is Dr. Asan Abdullah with the course Deep Reinforcement Learning. And the topic which we are covering is neural networks. And this is the fourth topic in the list of topics of this course. And this topic of neural networks is divided into two subtopics, Lecture 4A and 4B. So, Lecture 4A covers the basic stuff, and the Lecture 4B covers slightly more complex material. So, as before, this video lecture and the other lectures are developed using the personalized learning management system easymcq.com/GoGet. So these are the list of topics which are covered in this course. And we are at the fourth topic, which is neural networks, which consist of 10 questions and answers. Basically, these are concepts. So this is the list of concepts, and the concepts which we will be covering in this lecture 4A are shown highlighted in yellow. So without further ado, we move on to the details of these concepts. So we are at topic 4A of deep reinforcement learning. The topic is neural networks. And in this topic, we'll also be covering back propagation. So what is a neural network? The first question or the concept is, what is a neural network and how does it mimic the brain? So mimic means basically copying or trying to represent something or emulate something. So that is the meaning of a mimic. So how does the neural network tries to behave like a brain? So here's the neuron, which is actually there in the brain, and there are millions and billions of such neurons, and they are connected, interconnected. We'll talk more about it. And this is the computational model which represents that neuron. So remember why we are interested in a model, because a model is a mathematical representation. So if something can be represented mathematically like this can be coded also. And when something can be coded, then we can do a lot of things. So what is a neural network? Basically, it's a computational model, as I said before, and it is used to do what? It is used to simulate the structure of the brain. It is used to simulate the function of the human brain. We are not talking about rats. So what does it consist of? It consists of layers of these are the layers. Okay, the layers of artificial neurons. So this is the actual neuron, and this is artificial neuron. So layers of artificial neurons. Okay, and they process the information. These layers process the information, and that processing is inspired by what? The biological neurons. These are the biological neurons. So what we do is that we in computer science, what we do is, and in deep learning also, what we do is we try to we are inspired by natural events, and we try to emulate them, like say for example swarm intelligence, like say for example genetic algorithms, like say for example simulated annealing, and so on. So we are inspired by those things. So and then we try to model them. So these models of artificial neurons, okay, they are central, they are main constituent of the deep learning, and they are widely used. And why they are used widely? Because they are successful. And where they are successful, these models, they are successful in image recognition, in language processing, in decision making, and so on. So what is an artificial neuron? So of course this is very complex. This is based upon cells, and it's a very complex thing, and DNA, I believe, and RNA. So of course this is a simplified version of a neuron. So as this neuron receives input, so this also receives input. Okay, and they compute a weighted sum. So this is the weighted sum. Okay, and then pass it to the next layer. Okay, or next layer of neuron. So this kind of mimics or simulates the how brain neurons fire. Actually, when the neurons fire, they generate an electrical signal, and those signals can be actually measured also. They are devices like EEG devices. So and these neurons, the brain fires these neurons, okay, in response to a stimuli. For example, you see something, you eat something, you hear something, you taste something, you drink something, and so on. So these are the stimuli, and you're angry, you're happy, or you are sleeping, or you are gotten awake, whatever. So these neurons are fired, okay, and of course, then you can make decisions also, and so on. You means we. So we are looking at artificial neurons, all right. So these artificial neurons make a network. Okay, these actual neurons also make a network, which is very complex, as a matter of fact. And with these artificial neurons, we also make a network. Okay, so we'll be discussing such networks in this course. So this is the input. Okay, this is the input layer. Then is the hidden layer. So this is the input where the input comes. Then there are layers in between, and then there's the which are the hidden layers. Okay, and then is the output layer. So and of course each layer which we'll be following here, which are present here, okay, they basically process information, all right, and process from basic features to complex concepts, especially in deep learning. And of course this is hierarchical. Okay, so the brain may not be working like this. So this is, we say that we are kind of emulated. So we're trying to see, and we're trying to ensure that we this system works like the brain interprets sensory inputs, okay, and forms the abstract understanding. But that abstract understanding becomes a problem in the long run, because in the long run, when we are working with deep neural networks, we would like to know how things happen. Okay, then are the synaptic weights. Okay, these so we have these synaptic weights. So the weights are on the edges. Synaptic weights, so they control the strength of the connection between the neurons. Okay, so because this input might be coming, this output might feed into certain input of a neuron. Okay, and so these weights control the strength, and basically this is where the learning takes place. We'll talk about it. And this is similar to the synapses in the brain. Pardon my pronunciation. Okay, so these weights, okay, determine the influence of other neurons. So this output goes into the input of some neuron, and these weights okay, they ensure, and they determine the influence of one neuron signal on another. So during the training, which we will discuss a lot, we have discussed it also, the network adjusts these weights, okay, to improve the performance, to improve the recognition, say for example. And this is very similar to how the brain strengthens or weakens the connections. And those connections are strengthened or weakened based upon the experience and based upon the learning. So what is the learning mechanism? What is the learning mechanism? So basically the learning takes place, this the learning is adjustment of these weights, number one. So the learning takes place. How does the learning takes place? By minimizing the predicted error, okay, between the label assigned and the actual label, okay. And this is the back propagation. So output goes back, and this is fed here, and we'll talk about it. Okay. Okay, and this is and this back propagation is supported by the gradient descent to as to minimize the error. And we have at length we have discussed gradient descent. As a matter of fact, more than what we'll be discussing about neurons, neural nets. So this process is similar to the brain's process, in which the brain learns. And how does the brain learns? The brain learns by feedback. The brain learns by feedback. Okay, this is going back. The brain learns by feedback, and the brain and the brain adapts. Okay, so these neural networks, these layers of artificial neurons, they also adapt. Okay, and they also update, right? And those weights are updated, and the internal parameters are updated. So what happens that it allows to improve the tasks. The task which they are doing, say for example, this is doing image recognition. So by repeated exposure, okay, the task is improved. The execution of the task is reviewed. Just like humans do. So for example, we say that practice makes perfect, or that kung fu artist Bruce Lee said that I'm afraid of a person who has practiced a kick 10,000 times, not a person who knows 10,000 kicks. So that's the practice. Then is the non-linear processing. So non-linear processing, if if you are just adding up these things, okay, then it will be an underfit. We'll talk more about underfit. So because the life is non-linear, as we have seen is in the lost space of deep learning. So we need to have non-linear activation function, okay, that allows the artificial neural networks to capture complex patterns. Okay, just like the biological neurons which we have, they respond to non-linear ways to stimuli which we experience. So remember, without non-linearity, networks would be limited to simple. Like if it was just adding, okay, then it would be simple. It would be an underfit. Okay. So the key feature is allowing and enabling the neural networks to solve problems. Solve problems which are complex, which are layered, which have abstract data transformations, and which are non-linear. So non-linearity is the key here. So whatever I have discussed, the details are given here as before. Okay, artificial neurons and everything, and synaptic weights and so on. And then of course, if you are interested, then more details are available if you want to read. So we move on to the next question. How does information flow through a neural network? It is called as the forward propagation. And there is also a back propagation also, or backward propagation, which is also called as back propagation. So towards the end of this lecture, we'll have three Q&As. All right. So what happens? So this is the structure of that artificial neural network, right? We discussed in the previous Q&A. And as you can see that we have the input layer. This is the visible layer. This is the output layer where the output comes, and this is the hidden layer, which is between the input layer and the output layer. Okay. So as we go over these bullets, I will talk about what all this means. So what happens in neural networks is whatever is going from left to right. This is basically the forward propagation, and it is the process by which the data. This is the data moves to the network. From here, it goes there, there, and then and so on, and it produces an output. So everything starts at the input layer. Maybe this is say we need to classify certain documents. So these are the documents. Document classification. So everything starts at the input layer. This is the input layer. Okay, passes through one or more of the hidden layers. So in neural networks, there are not many of these hidden layers. As we've discussed before, in deep learning, there may be hundreds and thousands of those hidden layers. So passes through one or more hidden layers and ends at the output layer. This is the output. So and each neuron within this network performs certain tasks, performs certain computations, and transforms the data and produces the output. All right. So if I zoom in over here, so we have this activation function, which I believe we discussed in the previous Q&A also. So we have this activation function, and this activation function, this basically it acts upon the weights, uses the weights, okay, edge weights and the neurons, right? So A1, and this as per this notation, so W11 into A10, this is the layer, this is the layer zeroth layer, so to say. And then the second neuron and the third neuron, and then B1. And at the next or the hidden layer, we have the corresponding thing. And what is B1? That's the bias. That's based upon the backward propagation, okay, or back propagation. So we'll talk more about back propagation. Okay, so input reception. So what happens in input reception? This is from where the forward propagation starts. Input reception, that's the input layer. And raw data like images or numbers or documents in this case or audio enters the input layer of this neural network. And each feature, okay, passes through the corresponding neurons. So since we are talking of neural networks, okay, this is not deep learning where the features are assigned or not by the humans but automatically determined. Over here, the features are assigned by AI engineers. So each feature passes through the corresponding neurons. These are the neurons, okay, and they are prepared for further transformation. So what this ensures that the data is formatted, that the data is distributed effectively for effective processing in the subsequent layers. Then is the weighted summation. So which we have seen before. This is the weighted summation. This expression is a weighted summation. So in each neuron, the received inputs are multiplied by their corresponding weights. Weights are here, okay, and they're summed together with a bias term added. This is the bias term. Where does this bias term come from? That comes from the errors. Okay, that comes from the gradient descent. And so this weighted summation determines the signal strength, which goes to the next layer. Okay, and of course that influences the input to this next layer. So this kind of mimics the biological neurons in our brain. Okay, which are integrating signals. Okay, and then they decide whether to fire or not, whether to activate or not. Okay, so we have covered this. And then is the activation application. So after the summation has taken place, okay, then the activation function is applied to introduce non-linearity. So maybe in the next Q&A we'll look at the activation function also. Okay, and I don't think we had the activation function in the previous. Let me take a look. So we had that activation function. Okay, We had that activation function. So that's the activation function we are talking about. This step decides whether to fire the neuron or not. Now, this firing is not in the literal meaning as in the brain. It's like activation. And if it is decided to be fired, then what should be the strength? Okay, that's output. So there are functions. There are many functions. There's a Q&A. I don't know, 10 or 12 such functions, like ReLU, like Sigmund or 10H, and which basically help the network to model complex relationships. Okay, which is the real life thing. So, and of course, then it's able to solve non-linear problems. Okay, so let's go down. All right. So then is the layer transition. So what is layer transition? Layer transition. So once this is activated with a certain strength, okay, then this output becomes the input to the next layer, and this transition keeps on going, keeps on repeating through all the hidden layers. Okay, there are multiple hidden. In this case, there's a single hidden layer, and then basically what it does, it enables the network to gradually refine its understanding of the input. So there's a hierarchy, okay, which we have spoken about, and each layer captures uh, abstract features increasingly. Each layer, this layer, if there is a 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 layer, okay, and there is a hierarchy of representation of the data which was fed here. All right. So then is the final output. So what is the final output? The final output at the last layer. This is the output layer. Final output. The processed data produces a prediction or a decision. This is a cat. This is a dog, and so this is a decision. Okay, or this is a dog with 90% probability. So depending upon the task. So this output may be classification. This output could be numerical value. It could be probability. So what it does, it reflects the learning of the network, the interpretation of the input. Okay, and is used to compute the loss. Okay, for the learning adjustments. So if you're happy with this output, then you don't adjust it. If you're not, then you adjust it. All right. Okay. So what we have just discussed, the details are here as before. You can read these details, okay, and you can hear the references for subsequent additional reading. So maybe this question should have come before the one we just discussed, because this is what is a one-to-one neural network. Basically, it is the simplest form of a feed-forward artificial neural network. And what it consists of, it consists of one input neuron, two neurons in a single hidden layer, and one output neuron. So one input, two hidden, one output, one to one. So although it's very simple, but this architecture which we have like discussing, that that plays a crucial role and understanding how neural networks work and how they can learn non-linear relationships in the data. That's the key thing here. All right. So this is a one-to-one network. So we have it is very simple, right? So this is the input layer. This is the hidden layer, okay, and this is the output layer, so to say, one-to-one network. All right. So one input neuron, single input neuron that receives one feature or a variable, maybe the height of a player, basketball player, or maybe the weight of a wrestler, so on. So this neuron base simply passes the input value forward to the hidden layer, okay, and this acts as the entry point for data into the network without applying any transformation, because there's no transformation here. So the hidden layer there, so the two hidden neurons in the hidden layer. I'm sorry, I should have highlighted it. So two hidden neurons, okay, each applying a weighted sum and activation function to the input. Weighted sum and activation function. Looks like a sigmoid. Okay, yeah, it is sigmoid. It doesn't look like it is sigmoid. And introduces the learnable parameters, which all right. So what it does, it allows the network to detect simple patterns and relationships in the data. Simple pattern, because it's very simple. There's only one output neuron, one output neuron, okay, and a single, and which collects signals from the two hidden, collects signals from the two hidden neurons, processes them, bias is added, and produces the final result, okay. This output can be classification, it could be continuous value, it whatever, it depends upon the task assigned. So this is a simple non-linear model, all right. And and don't underestimate it, because it can model non-linear relationships between the input and the output. And these non-linear activation functions, these non-linear this is you can see that this is definitely non-linear, allow the network to learn non-linear decision boundaries, which are curved, quadratic, right? Which are not straight state mappings. And of course, that makes it more powerful than linear models. So, what is a universal approximation example? This is also called as a minimal example of the universal approximation theorem. What does that theorem states? It states that a neural network with even one hidden layer, can approximate any any continuous function, given there are enough neurons in that layer. This is one hidden layer. What it shows that even small networks can be mathematically powerful. And of course, due to its simplicity and very few parameters, this is ideal for teaching and demonstrating, right, how the neural networks work. And it helps the learners, like students, understand forward propagation, understand backward or back propagation, understand non-linear modeling, without the complexity of deeper or wider architectures. Okay, so as before, okay, the details are here. You can read the details, and then you can, of course, look at the references also. Enough references. So, what are activation functions and why are they essential? So, let's take a look at it. So, this is an example of some of the activation functions, and of course, they are not the only activation functions. There are other uh, types of activation functions also. So, what are basically activation functions? We'll cover this. Basically, these are mathematical operations. As you can see, this is a sigmoid activation function. Okay, and this is the max one, and so on. So they are applied to the output of each neuron in a neural network. So the output goes through the activation function, and what it does, it introduces non-linearity into the model, makes it more realistic. And because of that non-linearity, the neural network, okay, is able to approximate. The neural network is able to approximate uh, non-linearity of the model. Okay, able to approximate complex functions and able to learn detailed or complex patterns in the data. Otherwise, it would be just a straight line. Okay, so it would be just a straight line. So I prepared this example for you. So if it was just linear, right? So a linear would be a straight line, right? So that would be a straight line, and I believe this will draw a straight line. So I'm sorry about that. So it draws a straight line. So this straight line, basically it is assigning these green objects also, or the blue ones are going with the green. Now, if it had non-linearity, okay, then it could have been going like this. So this non-linearity we are introducing to look and to work on the complex patterns. So that's the objective of this non-linearity. I believe now you understand. Okay. So now you can see that without activation, okay. So without activation functions, right, and a neural network, independent of the number of layers it has, would just work like a simple linear regression model, which I showed you, right? And then it would limit its capacity, and it's not going to work for image recognition or natural language processing or speech synthesis or whatever. Then how would so that's the problem. Now I believe you understand. So the non-linearity is the key. So these activation functions introduce non-linearity into the neural. So you see that this is non-linear. Okay, linearity would be uh, linearity would be something like this. like this. Okay, so this is non-linear. We can see this. So this non-linearity. Okay, just hold on a sec, please. All right. So so that's the benefit of non-linearity. There is the information filtering. So because of these activation functions, they help control the which neurons will be active for which responses. So when you can make a neuron active or inactive depending upon the certain response, this is basically a filtering operation. So basically we end up having selective activation. Selective activation over here, this is everything is working as per this red line. So I'm going to clear this. Selective activation, and this enables the network to focus on only those features which are relevant. And of course, noise reduction also takes place. And when the noise reduction takes place, then there is the representation can be sparse. Okay, the representation can be sparse, which we have seen before can help, as a matter of fact, or enhance generalization and model performance that we have shown. Then is the gradient flow. So what is gradient flow basically? Uh, when back propagation takes place, back propagation is what was classified and it is compared with what it should have been. So these activation functions influence how the gradients are uh, passing through the network. So if these activation functions they are not properly chosen, okay, what they're going to do is that they can lead to vanishing or exploding gradients, which we have discussed. Vanishing gradient may get stuck on a plateau, and when that happens, the training is halted. Okay. Now, if properly well-suited activation functions are used, okay, they will ensure that there is the learning is stable and the learning is proper and the learning is effective also. So these are the activation functions which are basically used and which have been used and have been around for a while. So in output mapping, so the activation function in the output layer play a key or pivotal role in final predictions of a network. So what they do is they do a mapping of the raw outputs into appropriate formats. Which format? Such as probability in classification, or it could be continuous values in regression. So what this ensures is that the model's output are interpretable and they are actionable. They meet the requirements. And then finally is the model complexity. So when we allow these non-linear transformations, okay, so non-linear basically it kind of adds the flexibility to the entire process. To this non-linearity makes the neural network flexible, and this non-linearity between layers and these activation functions, what do they do? Is that flexibility allows the neural network to model complex and high dimensional relationships, which I just showed you. So what is the what is the outcome? The outcome is that this basic layers or basic stack of layers is transformed into powerful system. And what how it becomes powerful? It is able to approximate complex and intricate functions, and it can solve sophisticated and complex tasks in image recognition, in image processing, in natural language processing, and so on. So here are the details if you are interested, and you should be reading these details. And here are the references. Okay, so there are quite a few references. So now we are towards the end of this subtopic, so to say, 4A. So how does the neural network learn from data? What is the training process? Now we have kind of covered this training process in the previous Q&A. So, but now we'll cover maybe in more detail. So this is the forward and the backward propagation. So this we covered forward propagation in the previous Q&A. This is the forward propagation, and this is the backward or back propagation. Okay, based upon what was uh, predicted and what was identified. So that back propagation is used to adjust the weights of these edges, so to say, of this directed graph or this artificial neural network. So that's the back propagation, right? So this entire process. And of course, we have three Q&A towards the end of the next subtopic, which are only about back propagation. So, how does the neural network learn from data? This is the neural network, and this shows the entire process of learning. I will go through all of this. So, this is a structured training process, and that involves feeding the inputs. These are the inputs, feeding the inputs, predicting the outputs. These are the prediction, predicting the output, and measuring the errors. Loss function measures the error. Okay. So, this is the comparison based on the true value, and this is true value is y, and predictive value is y dash. So you have this loss function, then you have the loss score also. Measuring the errors and updating the internal parameters. These are the internal parameters, the weights, and to improve the accuracy. Now this is an iterative process. Iterative process, you can see is keeps on going like this. Iterative process, and that consists of multiple passes over this, which is called as epochs. So first, the training data is put in the network, and each example passes through the network. This is the forward propagation. And when the model predicts, output is based upon the current weights. These are the current weights. Then the predicted output is compared with the actual target, right? And the using a loss function, you have a loss function, you have a loss score, and then you generate the error. Okay. And then the network goes back propagation. That's the back propagation, where it calculates the gradients, partial derivatives, gradient descent of the loss with respect to the weight. Loss with respect to the weight, which I've shown a number of times. And then these gradients tell us what should be the weight, and what weight and which weights contribute to the error, and this keeps on going. And then of course the predictions become better. So now we do it bullet by bullet. Okay, bullet by bullet. All right. So training starts by feeding the data input. Okay, and the corresponding outputs into they come from the network. And of course the data needs to be properly processed, and it should be structured. We'll cover some of this material in the next topics also. And each input, remember, each input, this is the input, is used by the network to generate predictions over here, predictions produced over here, and learn the patterns by comparing it with the true output, true value. So then is the forward propagation that we have discussed, actually we have discussed all of this, right? So no point in further discussing it. Now what I can tell you is that we have discussed this, and you don't have to remember anything. The details are given here. Try to understand this, and then we have the references if you want to read further. So that's all for this topic. Thank you very much.